Hey guys, welcome to Yowie Files. I'm Roger, I'll be your host. First off, a little housekeeping. The song you're listening to right now is The Sweetest Kill by an amazing Canadian band called Broken Social Scene. And the Halloween-esque piano work before that is from an artist by the name of Kevin MacLeod. His details and many more details about the show are available in the About box in the video description of the show. If possible, I'd like to intro every episode with a new artist, so if you're an independent songwriter or in a band and you'd like me to use one of your tracks at the beginning and end of an episode, please hit me up at yowiefiles@gmail.com. That's YOWIEFILES @gmail.com. And a little bit about me, there's really not much to say other than I'm an amateur paranormal enthusiast amongst many other things, and I'm particularly interested in the idea that relic hominids may be creeping around the dark nether regions of this planet. And before you switch off and roll your eyes, please consider that Neanderthal allegedly only went extinct 30,000 years ago, Homo floresiensis extinct 10,000 years ago, which really is just a drop in the ocean. So I believe there's certainly enough eyewitness testimony and indigenous mythology to suggest that, along with the fossil record, the science seems to support that there just might be a relic hominid species or two wandering around the planet. Okay, New Zealand born, I'm Australian raised and based, so the show will center mostly around those two countries and some of the fascinating accounts coming out of both areas. This show was sort of born from the fact that I'm a big fan of podcasts in North America like Sasquatch Chronicles, Dogman Encounters, Brenton Soren's Mysteries to Search. And it kind of became obvious to me that there seemed to be a bit of a niche available for Aussie-flavoured encounters, certainly in terms of the podcast. I know the Australian Yowie research guys do a great job on having eyewitness accounts up on their YouTube channel, and you should check it out because they're really, really fantastic encounters. Anyway, so if you have an experience as an Australian or as a visitor to Australia and you'd like to get it off your chest, please email me at theyowiefiles@gmail.com. That's THEYOWIEFILES@gmail.com. I'd love to have a chat with you and maybe get you on the show. And, you know, you can remain anonymous if you like. It's really of no consequence to me. It's just great to hear stories. Okay, I'll get right down to it today. Our first guest is Dave from the Sunshine Coast Yowie Research Centre. He's based in Queensland, Australia. You can check them out on Facebook. They have some really great information available and some cool pictures from research expeditions they've conducted. I believe they'll be having some research expeditions coming up, so if you're interested in trying something different, I recommend you look up Dave on his Facebook page at Sunshine Coast Yowie Research. Hey Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool. So can you, for the audience and myself, can you tell us what sort of got you down this path in the first place?
Well, what got me down the path is about 5-6 years ago. And an old partner of mine, ex-partner of mine, were walking through Delarcha National Park on our push bikes actually to go and have a look at the old train tunnel there that's been closed, but they've left the train tunnel open. So we left the Landsbrand on our bikes and started heading towards the train tunnel. And we got to a point where there was a fork in the road. The track that we're travelling along went along the fence and the railway line was on our right. And we got to a fork in the line and one track went left. And the person I had with me at the time said, "Oh, we should turn left here." And I'm explaining to him, "No, we've got to go right," because I looked at the map before we left as well. And when I pulled to the left, there was like a fork. And right there had a sign with a map on it, basic map. Excuse me, and there was all tree roots around. And the tree roots were quite high out of the ground, and I remember pushing my bike in between the roots, and it sort of held my bike up as I was pointing to the person. "We got to keep going straight." And she said, "Yep, fine, that's fine." And she started riding off, but I had to pull my bike back and then go that way. And as I did, something drew me to the left, and I remember turning to the left, and it would have been about 3 seconds max, and I just saw this big browny, lighty, hairy, looked like an ape crossing the path to my left up the hill. And one step it was across the track, another step was in the bush, and by the time I took the third step it was gone. Couldn't see it completely.
And approximately what time of day was that? Right?
That was around 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
It was approximately 10 o'clock in the morning.
And how far away from it do you think it was?
It would have been 100 metres.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it must have been fairly big for you to sort of catch.
It was. Yeah. It was quite big. It was sort of leant forward as it walked. Like it went up and then sort of crouched as it walked. The back of it. But yeah, and then I reported it to a Yowie group. After it happened, the full story is after it happened, my partner and I, we kept going to the train bridge, and then we'll get out to a train on a town on the other side of the Larcher National Park, and we're going to get on the train with our bikes and come home that way. It just didn't know what to think, didn't know what to expect. And we got to the tunnel, and when we got to the tunnel, we smelled this horrible smell. It's a cross between really strong urine and rotten meat. We went through the tunnel. We just put it down to be in the tunnel. We went through the tunnel, and the tunnel goes for about, once the tunnel gets out the other side of the tunnel, it goes for about 500 metres, and then you're in a town, a little town. And as we get close to the exit, we noticed that there was a couple of girls that were running, going for a jog up there. And I said to my partner, maybe I didn't see it. Maybe I didn't. People wouldn't go and be coming through the park if whatever it was there. So we decided to head back that way, and we'll follow them on our bikes, and we'll see what happens. And so we did. We got up to the tunnel, and when we got to the tunnel, before they got in the tunnel, they turned around and ran back. And we had two choices: keep going on our bikes, or go back into town, get on the train, and get back to Landsborough. So we decided that we will just go for it. Got on our bikes, and my partner back then, she went first, and I got my bike behind her and followed her. And we went through the tunnel, and out of the tunnel, and to our right, it's like a ledge that follows the track for a while. And as we're going, we got this immersed feeling of danger, like, get out of here, I've never felt danger like that before. It was just immense. It was like actually being in a horror movie, but not being in one. I've never felt that horror in my body in my life. We just floored it. We heard a few sound like branches breaking to our right, but my ex-partner then, she just floored it, and I had to keep up with her. And as you're heading back into Landsborough, there's a right that you turn that takes you to the car park, and we were that concerned and that worried. We missed it, and we kept going, and we ended up at the back of the house. This is the house estate. We had to come along the fence line and work our back out to the house. And at first, I didn't want to tell anyone, so I thought people think I was a lunatic. And I spoke to my ex-mother-in-law about it back then, and she said, you got to tell someone. Mm. And I contacted another organisation, and they sent a few people out, and that was the Australian Yowie researchers, and they confirmed the footprints. Amazing.
So, sorry to interrupt, but your friend at the time, did she see it the first time when you caught a glimpse of it? Yeah, okay. And
she was already right. I had to pull the bike back.
Right, and did you tell her that you'd seen it?
Yeah, she said I was white as a ghost, and I was shaking, goosebumps all over me.
I bet. And what's really interesting about your encounter is the girls that were running towards the tunnel, and they turned around and came back. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think they saw something? No. Maybe it was a smell, or you just think maybe in general those girls didn't want to go into the tunnel because it's scary?
I just actually thought it was just general.
Yeah, interesting.
But my concern there was you get back, into Landsborough and get back home.
And you felt, when you went through there, you felt this just overwhelming sense of panic
danger.
And danger.
Yeah.
Get out of there, which is very common in
it was just,
a lot of encounters.
Oh, it was just virtually uncontrollable. It was like I was shaking. It was just, yeah. I just can't explain it. It was just an absolute, shock.
Yeah, well, it's like it's the first time you've ever sort of encountered something like that. It's overwhelming, and gosh, to have you've seen this thing, and then you've got the smell, and then you've had the overwhelming sense of fear. You sort of got that triple whammy, right?
Yeah,
It must have been quite a day for you, and that sort of sent you down the path from there.
it did. That's right. It curiosity killed the cat in my way. It turned me the other way, and I was quite interested in I wanted to know what I saw. You know, when I was a kid, I heard of a few stories about things like that, but, you know, being a kid, I didn't really believe in it much until you actually see one. I strongly believe that I wasn't chosen to be seen by one. I don't think, as some people say, that I was lucky. I believe it's stuff that he made a mistake.
Right.
And that's why I seen it. I don't think it realised I was there because it was just walking casually. It didn't look at me. It just, yeah.
Now, when you saw it, what were you feeling?
It was like two things crossed my mind. It was like an ape, no human, no ape, and the rest of it was just get out of here.
Do you did you get a sense of, I know it was, what, about 100 metres away, but did you get a sense of how tall it was, do you think? Was there any way you could estimate that?
When I took the other researchers back there the following day and relived the experience, they said that I was shaking when I relived it. Going back in there, I was really, really hesitant. And when I took them back to the fork, I pointed to them roughly how high it was on a tree. One of the researchers stayed with me while the other one went up and raised up his hand, and then he used a stick to, when I said stop, and it was approximately, they said, about 7 to 8 feet.
That's amazing. And it was just crouched a little bit on its way?
No, it just looked like, it was like hunched type of thing.
Sort of hunched a little bit,
yeah.
Wow, it's a very big animal. And so from there, so you contacted the Australian Yowie research guys?
Yeah, and they sent a couple of researchers up there, and one of them now I'm a really good close friend with him. And I've continued from there. And then my main focus was the larger national park. It took me about a week to build up courage to go back in there.
Right.
The first time I went back in there, it was only through halfway, and then I came back. And at the time when I saw it too, I actually turned around and I rang my son, my 17-year-old son, and I said to him, if I don't make it home, you know where I am, send the police here.
So it resonated with you that significantly?
Yeah.
You're that concerned?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so from there, you sound like a guy that you spend quite a lot of time in the bush, riding your bike, you bushwalk.
Yeah, I always have been. I've done it for years, and just that one day, bang, just everything just changed. The way I looked at things, the way I thought about things, it was just a total life changer.
Well, it's understandable. It's the same with anybody. It's a paradigm change, right? Suddenly something that is not supposed to exist is standing there right in front of you. And what does that mean about literally everything else that you've been told,
Well, that's true. And then I started getting close to another researcher, and I got a couple other friends who decided to come in there with me one day. And we noticed that a few trees were broken at ankle high, real big thick trees, and they just snapped and twisted at the same time. And so I contacted them again, and they sent up another researcher. And he decided to go up there one night and just to camp out in there on his own. And he was in there for 2 hours, and he left due to somebody didn't want him in there. And he said it was just you'd hear it breaking trees down and stuff like that. So he contacted me about 10 o'clock at night, and I said, okay, I'm going to go and have a look in the morning, just to have a look, see what's going on. And we went there in the morning, and about 200 metres in the bush on the right, there was an area, would have been about the size, about 50 metres round, and all the trees were just broken.
Wow.
Pushed over, broken. So I rang the researcher and said, hey, this is what's going on. And also in there, and I've got copies of it, there was these big boulders along the side of the track, rocks, and they were easily weigh 1 ton. And the researcher said, do me a favour. And I said, yeah, what's that? He says, if you can, urinate on some of those rocks. I don't know if I can say that.
Of course.
And yeah, and so I did. And we went back there the next morning. And when we went back there the next morning, there was no more trees broken or anything like that. I'm thinking, didn't do anything. But then when I looked closer, I realised, hang on, something more sinister's happened here. And I noticed that these 1 ton rocks had been picked up and thrown. And when I took photos and looked around, because these rocks have been there for a while, and when I looked at the base of where the rocks were taken from, there was no stick marks. There was no dig marks. It looked like somebody had just walked up, cleanly picked it up and threw it. And there was about 12 of them.
Wow. So I don't know whether that was such good advice to get you to challenge its territory. Like
yeah. So from there it progressed. I started exploring other areas of the forest forest trees around Landsborough and Biwa.
And just for listeners who aren't familiar with the area, can you tell them exactly where that is in Australia?
That's on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
It's about an hour north of Brisbane, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about an hour north of Brisbane.
Yep.
It's up near Australia Zoo. Yep. It's all pine forest, most of it, but then it does change in locations to thick scrub, a lot of it lantana and stuff like that up there as well. The national parks that I really concentrated on was the Delarcha one, which goes halfway up the range to towards Bull Knob up there, and the other one was the Biwa State Forest, and that all goes in behind Australia Zoo, and all the way down to Coochin Creek and Beergraham State Forest, and all the way down to nearly all the way down to Caboolture, including Glasshouse Mountains Lookouts, Mount Tivergargan, and all the way inland to Balthorpe.
Yeah, and that what you described is literally thousands of acres.
Yeah, and Peachester Forest too as well.
Yeah.
Some days I'd spend a full day in there.
Yeah.
Just looking for answers.
Yeah, and when we spoke on the phone, you were telling me that you had an experience with your son.
Yeah, my son, he was 17 at the time. Done a lot of MMA fighting. He doesn't scare easy. He decided to come out one day with me just to do a bit of a walk, and we actually had 2 other researchers from another organisation come out with us, and we're walking through the thin forestry, and my son was about 20 metres in front of me. It wasn't scrub, it was just forestry, bit of lantana around, a lot of pine needles on the ground that were walking on really soft. And a few locations there it looked like something heavy had been walking through there, but because of the pine needles on the ground and that, it just couldn't get detail. And I looked up and we were walking, and I noticed my son was just pointing and frozen. And I ran up to him and I said, "What's wrong?" And he was just like stuttering and pointing, and he was white as a ghost. And I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he said, "Monkey." And I said, "Where?" And he said, "It was behind that tree." The tree was about 50 metres away. We progressed to the tree, and the other 2 guys came as well. And we didn't find nothing there. But like I said, there was because the pine needles, and it was quite thick. There was a few indentations that looked like could possibly have been footprints, but seeing your own son just freeze like that and white as a ghost, There was not a doubt in my mind. He was telling me the truth, you know. There was another time there I would do different sections of the forestry. Early morning, we pulled up to look at one track, and it was just a motorbike track. So I thought that was fair enough, and we go to get back in the car, in the vehicle, and we hear this howl. The first time I heard it, but it was like a dog, but it wasn't. It was like a scream, cross howl from a dog, but it was too high pitched to be a dog, and it really echoed.
So what were the circumstances around that? You guys got into a different area?
Yeah, we just went into a different area down behind Australia Zoo.
And what time of day was that there?
That was about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
We went quite deep, looking for tracks, any hints of broken trees or any tracks, anything. And we found this one spot. We got out, looked like a good spot, and it's just a motorbike track. So we didn't get back in the car, and that's when we heard it. There was another location we went, and a few of us got out of the car and started walking. The track sort of followed the road for a bit there, and I go back in the vehicle to move the vehicle further down, and the next amount they all panicked. I said, "What's going on?" And they all swear that they heard, because you get a lot of broken old tin sheds and cars and stuff like that up there as well, and they all swore that they heard like a big hunk of metal come flying through the air, and they heard it hit a tree, but they couldn't see what location. There was one night there, and we decided to go to another location. This was up near not far from Yandina, and we went in there, and we walked in there for about 800 metres. I started getting this funny feeling, and we heard a few branches get snapped not long after that. And we kept walking. I think we got in there about 2 k's, and then we started getting rocks thrown at us. You couldn't see them, but you could hear them hitting the ground. And the more we progressed, the more noise was going on. You could hear things walking around. You could hear branches breaking. The rocks were getting bigger. So we decided to make a retreat. And we're walking backwards for nearly 2 k's, just watching to our left where it was all coming from. And the other researcher...
Is that because they were coming so frequently that
yeah.
It actually made you a bit nervous?
Yeah. And I've noticed, and I've got a rule that when I go out there, no matter what happens, you don't run. Just like native dogs, wild dogs, and wild cats over in Africa and stuff like that. The minute you run, it turns into a game, hunt and kill chase. So that I never do that. And over the years, I've noticed that whether you get sticks chucked at you, rocks chucked at you, whatever gets chucked at you, if you're walking backwards and you're facing that direction, you always seem to get out okay. The rocks and that will still come, but I've heard from a few other researchers where they've just done the sprint, and one researcher actually got tackled by something, and but he made out alive. He was a bit cut and bruised, but he got out okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a really wise approach. I mean, clearly, whoever or whatever this thing is communicating with you. It doesn't feel comfortable with you there. He wants you gone, wants you to move on.
Yeah.
So you don't antagonise the situation by running and amping anything up. What you do is you just back away and respectfully get out of there.
As we backed off, we walked quite fast backwards.
Yeah.
And we noticed over a period of time that the rocks decreased, but you still hear them in the bush to our left. And my 17-year-old son came out that night as well. There was 4 of us out there. And he turned around and he said, "Dad, we're not going to get out of here alive, are we?" I said, "Yes, we are. Just don't panic, just..." When we got about 500 metres from the car, everything just went quiet. And it was like nothing had happened, and it was just... We also just started relaxing. It was really, really weird.
Yeah, there seems to be a really strange and consistent element to people that have been in proximity to these things, that there is, it's almost an unseen energy that comes off them, and whether that has to do with the sounds they can emit, or whether it has to do with smells or pheromones or something. Well, it's very consistent.
A lot of the times when we go out and something goes down, the smell we get does vary, but it's normally around the same consistency. Some days it would be a combination of a really strong urine smell crossed with like rotten meat. Other times it would be more of a really strong urine smell, not so strong with the rotten meat. Other times you just really smell that rotten meat and vaguely smell the urine. Towards the end of last year, I got a message from someone that there's a lot of stuff going on around Mount Tibougargan. So my partner and we went up there. My other son wanted to come out, he's 17, a different son this time, to investigate during the day, just check out for tree breaks and any footprints and stuff like that. And we went in there, and where you got Mount Tibougargan, there's actually 3 ways you can walk from the car park. You can go left, middle or right. And we went right, but we didn't realise the right area was straight. And so we walked half the day around back to where we came. And when we got back, the tree breakage from Yowie was just phenomenal. It was everywhere, and the council would come in there and clean it all up. People say it could be a storm, but you won't get a storm that just picks certain trees and just snaps, this tree at the root and twist it.
I agree with you completely. It's completely illogical that it's a storm or some sort of weather thing. Unless it's just, of course, one tree in the middle of nowhere, and you can sort of see it burn, and then of course it looks like a lightning strike or something like that. But when it's in a region and they're in a pattern, or it's in one area and they're all sort of snapped off about 5 feet up, 10 feet up, something's clearly done it.
Yeah, well, that's right. Don't get me wrong. There's some days we'll go out and we'll find absolutely nothing. I take people out who are really skeptic, and we'll go out there and nothing. There was one time we went out to it's up Sandy Creek out at Kenilworth.
Yeah. And
when we found that footprint that measured 45, 48 centimetres, can't remember, but I've got the photo there, on the side of the embankment, that was halfway up Mullaney. That was on the western side of Delacha National Park. When we found the first print, contacted some other researchers and they came out. And then we found the next footprint, 1.5 metres apart. And then we found another print 1.5 metres later. And another 1.5 until eventually we lost it.
Yes.
You try doing that.
Oh. Yeah, it's a very, very squatchy sort of area. I remember taking some walks with a lot of tree breaks and a lot of TV structures in that area. Yeah. And that is, Mullaney's about sort of an hour inland, isn't it, from the coast? Yeah, well, this is Bald Knob, which is on the way to Mullaney. It's climbing up the range. And it's a beautiful area.
It's 200 metres above sea level. Yeah, it's really, really nice. As I was saying before, the guy that came out with us, a mate of mine who's a real skeptic, doesn't believe in them. We went out to Kenilworth during the day, and we were just driving around in there. We went in for miles, and we went to this one place and we started getting this strange feeling. And we got out of the car, we could hear something. And then, what is it? And we went for a bit of a walk, and a couple of people stayed at the vehicle. And my mate and I went for a walk. We went for a walk about 800 metres up around the bend. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and nowhere to lie, it sounded like monkeys or apes were talking, but it was different. It was more human vocalised cross ape, but without the English vocabulary, if you can understand where I'm coming from.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely listened to some of the samurai chatter and things like that. I definitely know what you mean. What I've noticed and what I found quite fascinating is that in North America, the vocalizations seem to have an almost Native Indian aspect to them. If you listen to Native American Indian language, it's very similar. And I'm told, people that have heard it here, it's very similar to ancient Aboriginal language.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If these creatures and humans lived in close proximity
Yeah.
for a long time, they would, of course, pick up similar traits.
And there was one time where we went back into the Larcher National Park, and we hear this screaming going on, but it wasn't human. I've never heard it before. I can't describe it. It didn't sound like any howl or growl which I've heard in the past or anything like that. It was a full scream. It was too loud, too deep to be a person. And it went on for about 15 minutes. And then we heard tree knocking. And then it stopped. And after my mate coming out there with me for about a week, we went out there every day for a week, different places. He turned around and he said to me, he said, "Mate, you have totally changed my mind." He said, "I can't tell you that it's Yowies or Bigfoot out there because I haven't seen one." He said, "But I can tell you there's something out there."
That's it's an inescapable conclusion.
Yeah.
When you spend time looking and paying attention and keeping an open mind. Before you were sorry to sidetrack you. Before I forget, you were talking earlier about an area where there was a lot of snap trees, and you said the council had come in and cleaned it up. Can you?
That was Mount Tibbergargan. When you pull in to the car park there, you got three ways you can start walking.
Yep.
You can go to the left, straight, or right.
Yep.
And where it was straight in, about 200 metres in, which is unusual, so close to a car park. And both sides of the track, trees were just snapped. 8 foot in the tree, 8 foot up, trees were snapped. Ankle high, they were snapped. Some of them were twisted and snapped. It just looked like something went absolutely aggro in there. I had a person contact me on my Facebook page telling me about it. And she said she had some sightings of like a Yowie cross, like dog creature down there. She said that she did have an actual photo of one, and but she separated with her ex-husband, and he took it, and he made her swear black and blue while he was with her that not to let it out that they were down there near the creek. And once they separated, she came clean with telling people where it is.
So why do you think the council were in there clearing
a lot of the trees were across the pathway.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so it was actually dangerous on the path.
Yeah. The path was blocked off.
Do you get the sense that they, clearly on certain levels, the government must be aware of these things?
I believe they are.
Yeah.
To me, you hear the same thing. You find bite marks in trees, and the government puts it down to cockatoos or wild birds or stuff like that. And hang on, you can actually see teeth mark. Cockatoo don't have teeth mark. Don't do teeth marks.
Yeah, not a foot long either.
No, well that's right. It's just amazing. Like I've worked out that there's corridors that these guys travel. They won't stay in one location very long unless there's something wrong. Now, I believe that when they're in a location for too long, they're either lost or hurt or something.
So you think they're fairly nomadic?
Yeah, I believe so. I've noticed, we could go out to Peachester State Forest one day and we'll hear tree knocking, and the next day we'll go out and we won't get nothing in Peachester, but if we move closer towards Beera, we'll come across some tree knocking out that way, and you can hear in the distance that the tree knocking. Well, either go away in the distance or slowly come towards you, but not get fully towards you.
So what's, in your opinion, clearly there's many different sort of theories on what they actually are, but what's your gut idea?
My gut feeling is, and this is one of the main gut feelings I've got, is they're saying that humans come from ape and a missing link. But there's a missing link, and they can't fill that missing link in. Personally, I believe the Yowies could be that missing link. They definitely have got, when you look at them, or when you see one, you definitely can see the ape, just because of the hair and stuff like that, and the size of them, the build of them. But then when you see them as well, you can see the human in them.
And it seems to me that there is quite a variety of different creatures out there that we don't know about, whether they're more sort of, like you were talking about before, more of a dog man type thing, for maybe want of a better word. I don't really necessarily really like that term. But it's clearly people, witnesses are referring to something with the snout.
Yep.
And with ears on the top of the head as opposed to on the side, and things that actually have almost dog-like hind legs, you know. And so there's those, and then there's also the little hairy man. So have you ever done any overnight camps in areas?
Not so much staying up completely overnight. Mainly, we'll go out investigating for a few hours. I choose more not to camp where they are more of a respect attitude than anything else.
Right. Yeah.
It's more of a respect.
Seems like a wise decision.
You know, my past experience, they don't want you there. The worst thing you can do is camp there.
Now, Dave, you believe they're organised in terms of the group behaviour when humans are in their area. Can you talk about that for the audience?
A few other researchers and myself actually believe that when you get a group of Yowie, hairy man, there's that many different names for them, they have two scouts which will go in front of the rest of them and scout out the area. We believe in that.
Sure, it kind of makes sense when you consider humans have historically probably had negative encounters with these hairy men. Indigenous Australian accounts even seem to support that. So when you also take into consideration that humans hunt using guns, it's not really difficult to imagine that Yowies would indeed have to keep a close eye on any human beings entering into their area. Now, you also have a theory as to why we don't see more of their tracks along dried creek beds. Can you talk about that for the audience?
I strongly believe that they don't actually walk along the creek bed, in the creek bed or the side of it. I believe that they will follow the creek bed, but just to the side. More along the grass area than actually soft sand or mud or dirt or anything like that. When they cross the creek, that's a different story. One of the photos I got there, it looked like that was down Roy's Road, creek down there. When I came across that footprint, I believe it was crossing a creek there.
Yeah, there's probably a good reason the Indigenous Australians call him the clever man. Also, for a long time, there was the idea that Aboriginals referred to the creature as having a backward-facing foot. And current thinking is that was kind of a misinterpretation, and the more correct interpretation, and one that seems to make more practical sense, is that it kind of refers to the creature's ability to utilize backtracking and other methods of subterfuge to disguise their tracks so they can't be followed by humans, which kind of makes a little bit of sense. Now, you mentioned earlier a disturbing report from an Aboriginal community in the north of Australia. Of course, I'd like to follow up on this, and maybe, if anyone out there knows anything about this story, please shoot me an email. I'd love to hear more about it.
Not so long ago, there was a report up north Queensland. There's an Aboriginal community, and they were out there playing football or cricket, one of the two. And the ball, whenever it went in the bush up there, the kids would go and get it for the older people. And one day there, the ball went into the forest, and a little boy went in there. Apparently he was about 6 to get the ball, and they noticed he didn't come back out. Apparently there was another couple of kids that weren't so far from him as well when he went into the bush, and they went in there looking for him. They couldn't find him, and a couple of kids popped up and said, "The hairy man took him."
Yeah, that's a chilling story, and one, once again, where their behaviour seems to parallel that of their cousins in North America and other parts of the world. It seems like they have an unhealthy fixation at times with children. It's also interesting to note that in the far north of Australia there seems to be many more reports of the smaller hairy man, and what really fascinates me about that is that just over the water in Indonesia, the local tribesmen and florists had a long-time alleged myth that there were small hairy men and women who had language and tool-making skills that would snatch their children and steal their food in the dead of night. So understandably, of course, mainstream science considered this to be just a myth to keep the children close at night. Well, in a startling twist, archaeologists then discovered the remains of what is now classified by science as Homo-Erectus, or the Hobbit people, in a cave along with their tools. And once again, science seems to support the indigenous and eyewitness accounts of these relic hominids existing. Another case of myth meeting science and equaling truth. It's interesting to note that the bones were dated at being only 10,000 years old, which, is a drop in the ocean in terms of evolution. So it turns out the subject isn't so crazy when you take into consideration the actual scientific evidence. And I've posted a fascinating photograph that was brought to you. It's up actually on the YouTube version of the podcast, which it'll pop up here in a minute. And you can get that at my Yowie Files YouTube channel, or you can see it at Dave's Facebook group on Sunshine Coast Yowie Research Facebook. Look, I just wanted to mention also that I make no claims of the veracity of any photo or video evidence that I do present. I just like to put it up for people to discuss. Now, I personally find this photo to be absolutely fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about how it came to your attention?
That was sent to me. A couple of Aboriginal kids were walking along the dirt road, and they noticed that the hairy man was walking towards them, and one of them took a photo of him. And that was put up on a page up in northern Queensland. And when the elders found out that it was up there, they made him remove it.
Right.
But people got hold of that photo and downloaded it.
Yeah, with all due respect to the Indigenous Australian culture, who have a great reverie for the creature, the idea is that sharing proof or pictures like this kind of provokes discussion and hopefully will heighten awareness, which will inspire people to take greater care out there in the bush.
That's the main reason why I put it up there and kept it up there, not anything against them. If I believe that there should be a lot more research done with the guys, especially, if they are part human, there should be some type of communication between, them and us.
Yeah, in an upcoming show I hope to bring on someone from the Indigenous community who has one of the most amazing encounter stories, which involves a territorial dispute between a clan of these creatures and a sheep farmer just west of Newcastle. The guy in question from the Aboriginal community really has impeccable credentials. He's fully vetted, so he's a pretty great source. I'll leave it at that for now, but I hope to have him in an upcoming episode. I'll let him remain anonymous until I'm told otherwise. So Dave, you've clearly had a lot of experience with encountering these creatures. In your opinion, what's the scariest aspect of all of those encounters?
The most scariest event is not when you're out there at night with sticks and rocks thrown at you, not when you're out during the day and you find a perfect footprint. It's not when you hear them howl or the growls or when you can smell the smell. That's not the scariest time you're out there. The scariest part is when you get that fear. That succumbs everything else. That's what I personally believe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Dave. It seems to me, judging from many eyewitness accounts which talk of that sort of eerie and overwhelming sense of dread which seems to take over an individual and at times can be, debilitating just prior to encountering one of these creatures, that there probably is something going on with that. Whether or not it's what is known as infrasound, which is something that big cats actually use when they roar or growl, and it can sort of momentarily stun their prey and will keep them immobile, those low frequencies. It could also be some sort of pheromonal secretion which we pick up sort of on a subconscious level. But it seems like it's a very real aspect of this phenomenon. It could also be possible that when they begin their warning growls, they do so at a pitch that's lower than human capabilities of hearing. And as science has proven, when an individual is exposed to similar subsonic tones, it can have devastating effects, which include dread, terror, confusion, adrenaline surges, hallucinations, shaking, sudden spikes in core temperature, to name a handful. Those vibrations can be very devastating to organs in the body. Now, you were saying earlier that you kind of noticed something about the way they stalk when you've heard them following you. Can you expand on that for us?
When you are out in the field and you're being followed by them, which does happen a lot, they always seem to follow. If you're walking, pretend you've got a clock in front of you and you're walking straight ahead, which is 12 o'clock.
Mm.
They always seem to follow you at either a 5 or 7 o'clock position, because that way they're following you, but they're also out of the line of sight.
Yep.
And they're not directly behind you on the bush track where you can turn around and see them as well.
You were mentioning earlier about an unfortunate situation with someone encountering one of these creatures with their dog.
There was one report about 4 years ago. There's in Biwa State Forest there's two mountains side by side. They call them the twins. About 4 or 5 years ago, a guy was up there with his dog, a really well trained security dog he had, a German Shepherd, and it took off after something one day there, and totally disobeyed the guy's command, which it never does. They found it 2 days later, ripped apart. Yeah. There was a guy up near Mapleton about 3 years ago. He contacted me, said that he lived across the road from a forestry. Went to his place and interviewed him, and he was telling me that he always used to take his dog for a walk across the road in the bush, because there was forestry and then there was bush, and he'd take his dogs for the bush part. He knew it quite well, and it does eventually turn into forestry, but he said dogs aren't allowed in the forestry, so he stick to the bush. And he used to let them off lead. He said they were very obedient, fully grown Rottweilers that they were. And one day there, he heard a couple of growls. He'd never heard it before, and he just thought it might have been pigs or something. But afterwards, when he thought about it, he thought, no, they weren't pigs. And the two dogs all of a sudden just took off something, and he said he heard something big about 100 metres up over this hill running. He said you could distinctly hear these steps running through on the leafage and stuff like that. And the dogs disobeyed him. And he went looking for him, calling out to him. One of them eventually came back, and it was getting dark. And he said, don't want to be out there when it's dark. And he went back across the road into his house and kept calling out to him during the night. And he rang his son. His son said, I'll be out in the morning. And he said during the night you could hear his dog howling a couple of times. Sounded like it was howling and yelping and crying, but it wouldn't come home. His son got there, and the next morning early, and they went in there, and about 2 hours later, and they found it, and it was ripped apart. A lot of people say, boars, but you don't get those big boars to do that around there. You get the wild pigs, but not those big boars, And his son was actually from the army, and he's actually done a lot of pigging himself. And he even said, I've never seen a dog being ripped so cleanly in half like what happened to it. He said just didn't know what to think, didn't know how to explain it. But then you also get reports that the hairy man do associate and will have dogs hang around them as well. So you put one and one together. Obviously they don't like domestic dogs, but wild dogs, dingoes and stuff like that.
Oh, if they're a benefit,
yes,
of course. And like, I'm a firm believer that if these things exist, and I'm 1,000% convinced they do exist.
Yep.
They have a variety of personalities, a variety of habits, a variety of
Yep.
One might like dogs, one might not. One might have had a dog bite its young one.
Yep.
Now then, all dogs get killed.
Yep.
Now you've recently moved, right, from Sunshine Coast. You're now down.
I'm now down on the Gold Coast.
And you want to sort of go out towards Springbrook and Hens Dam, which are hotspots from what I've seen in research.
And the Narang State Forest is a pretty good spot. So hopefully I'll be back into that very soon. And I hope to continue to get as much evidence down here as what I did up on the sunny coast. 99% of those photos on my Facebook page are directly from me.
Yeah, I can't recommend highly enough. Guys listening, please go to the Sunshine Coast Yowie Research Facebook page. There's some amazing photos. If you're a nerd like me and you like to stare at them for a long time and zoom in on them, there's some stuff in there that, honestly, in all my years, some of the best, the wackiest photos I've ever seen. Yeah. Amazing, mind-blowing stuff. Thank you so much, Dave.
No worries.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Yowie Files. Thanks for being here and being a part of the story. I appreciate the support. Sorry for any technical issues which may have sort of popped up. The sound quality, I know at times, was not consistent, but they're all things that we'll continue to work on and evolve and get better at. So yeah, once again, I really, really appreciate the support. I'd love to hear any feedback you might have, so please email me at yowiefiles@gmail.com with any suggestions. Otherwise, feel free to comment in the YouTube comments section, and please keep it civil and respectful when you're referring to our guests. Certainly takes some courage to come on and talk about this subject, and for that they should be commended and given our full support. Just so you know, Dave will be coming back. He's agreed to sift through his eyewitness reports and do an episode all about those. So you're really going to want to check that episode out. He's already given me a couple of teasers on that, and they're really very chilling stories. So if you like a spooky story, make sure you check us out. And please hit the subscribe button and turn on your channel notifications. If you're listening on YouTube, that way you'll be notified of episodes as soon as they're uploaded. And if you're ridiculously wealthy, please donate to keep us going. Okay, thanks everyone for being here. Be safe, and we'll chat soon.